Hi there, Release Fire here. So I'm going to talk you through how I managed to beat Type-0 Behemoth in the Final Fantasy VII Remake. He is an absolute beast. It took a lot to get through him, but I did manage to take him down. Hopefully the tips that I go through in this video are going to help you out. If they do, drop me a like below. But starting off, I focused my weapons and my accessories on being able to do as much damage as possible, because magic doesn't really work on this beast until you get rid of the horn, and that won't happen until much later in the fight, so you need to focus on your primary attacks, which is why your weapon damage needs to be as high as possible. So you can see here I've gone with pincers for Barret, for example, and I focused on health benefits like HP up and cures. I've also got Tifa with the metal knuckles, which I've got 1, 2, 6 in terms of attack damage, which gives her an overall attack damage of 240, which is pretty healthy. And then I focused all of her materia on healing, so I've got prayer in so I can heal the whole party, as well as standard healing and barrier, and all things that can keep everybody in the fight as long as possible. And then in terms of the battle itself, I'm just focusing Cloud on attacking the rear portion of Type-0 Behemoth, and I'm essentially trying to take out either the lower body or the upper body, because you've got to take these out and cripple them to be able to bring it down and to start to really do damage on the main part of the Behemoth. Now, if you're still struggling with this boss after you've watched these tips and given it a try, you can also think about upgrading your weapons with crippling damage. So you want to look out for any kind of upgrades that give you crippling effect, and that'll help you to take out the parts of the Behemoth a little bit easier. But in general, the process is to attack its rear portion, use Tifa to heal, and to give Cloud and Barret an element of barrier effect, and to just keep rolling out of the way of the Behemoth's attacks. Once you get into a position to be able to attack it from the rear, get in some hits with Cloud using Punisher mode, and then cycle, rinse, repeat a little bit. You can find yourself in a bad place if you circle around and then accidentally roll underneath it like I did then. But if you've got Tifa to heal him up, then it doesn't massively matter if it happens every now and again. Use your abilities on the lower body. Definitely focus on one element of it first. Don't kind of like just hit at it indiscriminately. I kind of found it was easier to hit the lower part of the body as a start of a 10. And then you will have just seen it's gone into rage mode. And while that can seem intimidating to start with, if you keep moving and rolling and staying out of its way, then you can reduce the amount of times that it hits you and still get yourself into a good position to do some damage. After it's gone nuts for a little bit in red form, as you can see now, it'll just sort of tire itself out and go back to its normal state, and then you can just keep on focusing your efforts on that lower body with abilities. So you can see here I'm hitting it with a charging uppercut on the upper body, and I'm essentially trying to do just as much damage as possible. I'm not thinking about stagger because the lower body doesn't have any stagger gauge whatsoever. Instead, I'm focusing everything on dealing damage and then using Tifa to keep everybody in the fight and to keep everybody's health bar pretty healthy. You can also use Tifa to do the barriers once again if you get a chance, but if you keep on focusing on the lower body, you can see it's dropped to the floor. However, that doesn't allow you to go after the horn. You've got to take out both the lower body and the upper body before you can attack the horn. So you can see here I'm using Blizzara on the upper body, and that'll do a huge amount of damage. All it can do at the moment is lift itself in the air and do this kind of like big stomping drop that lets out a huge amount of damage. And then if you just keep on focusing your attacks, you should be able to stagger it completely. And then it's just a case of keeping up with pressure and doing as much damage to it as possible. However, by this stage, your MP might not be looking so great, so you might need to drop in a little bit of an ether or a turbo ether to be able to actually do any huge damage to it. But if you do that early on, then you should be able to dish out a good amount of damage early on using Blizzara and any other abilities you've got from Tifa on the horn itself, and that will be your first opportunity to get some real hits on the horn. And all combined with everything that I've just thrown at it, I managed to take it down 50% in this first strike on the horn itself. You can see just how much damage all of that does. Now I got it in the process and Cloud went down, so I had to use a Phoenix down to be able to bring him back in the fight. But by this stage, you're really close to finishing off Type-0 Behemoth, so it's a really good idea to keep everybody in the mix and get back to basics, where the general strategy is attacking its rear portion, using Tifa to keep everybody in the scrap, and cycling through your attacks with Cloud on the lower and upper part of the Behemoth's body. But in a clutch moment, then you can switch over to Barret and use him to build up ATBs, and then as soon as you've got ATBs, you can throw a barrier in the direction of Cloud if you've got it, and that should be enough to allow him to stay in the fight in what is the kind of like the clutch moment in the entire scrap. You just got to roll out of the way, and what you're trying to do is build up an ATB. As soon as you got an ATB, then you can do something to help yourself out. But if you just keep on rolling, then you can really stay out of all of the attacks and get in a few hits as you're going. Then you can use a Phoenix down on Tifa, who is your defense expert, and as soon as she's back in the mix, you just want to again allow her to build up enough of an ATB to be able to use it. However, in the meantime, definitely focus on Cloud. So the best thing to do at this stage is just to roll, build up an ATB, and then use it to get yourself back into a position where you can actually take the fight to Type-0 Behemoth. So you can see here I'm just rolling, I've got Tifa back into the mix, I'm getting in a few hits on its lower body, and then as soon as I've got any kind of ATB, I'm using it to keep everybody back in the fight. So I've used Cloud to give Tifa a huge boost to health, and then as soon as Tifa builds up an ATB, I'll be able to use her to get Barret into the mix, or to give Cloud a bit of an extra boost in terms of his health bar. And while I normally skip over these elements of a fight where you kind of just like heal in and things like this, I kind of figure this is such a grueling physical boss fight that you definitely benefit seeing everything that I do to be able to see how you can replicate the same process to finish this beast off. I tried to keep it so that I had all of my party members active throughout most of the fight, so that there was enough of a distraction to Behemoth to allow me to do the things that I want to do. For example, you can see there it was so distracted doing its own thing in rage mode that it allowed me to get in quite a lot of health benefits and to bring Barret back into the mix, but then it doesn't take long before it starts doing some big damage on you. So you got to get back into the roll in, get yourself into a good position near the upper and lower body, and then just take aim at something, either one of these two, and get in your damage. Here you can see me doing a braver, and then again just sort of use all the abilities for the rest of your team to try to do as much damage on the back portion of Behemoth as you can, and then again using Tifa to throw in a little bit of health boost with Prey. But you can see by following this process I've managed to knock it down for the second time, taken out the lower body, and now I can go after the upper body with some focus shots, and I'm just trying to finish this section off as quickly as possible, which will then allow me to take another swipe at that horn. But at this stage the aim is just to build up ATBs for everybody while it's down on the ground. So you can see here I'm getting Clouds built up quite nicely, and then as everybody else's build up, the idea is I want to focus everybody in at the same time to do just a massive amount of damage. So I'm using a little bit of Glazara, I'm using Tifa's somersault, and when all those things combined I can stagger it properly, and this will allow me to do the most damage I've been able to do. And that's when I can unleash Cloud's Limit Breaker on it and follow it up with spells and abilities from everybody else just to keep up the pressure. And by this stage you should know that it is well and truly on its way to being finished off. It's almost like that moment in Monster Hunter World when the monster starts to limp off towards its cave, and this is pretty much the end of this boss fight. But you can never be too sure, so at this stage I threw in a cure for Tifa just to keep my entire party in pretty good check, and then it's just a case of rounding it and trying to do some damage. But as it turns out, I didn't need to because it was on its last legs already. And it starts to do this thing where it stands upright and drops boulders from the ceiling, which you can see are slowly taking out everybody in my team. It's also inflicting damage on itself. At this stage, I kind of thought it was necessary to hit up a Mega Potion for Cloud just to keep him in the match. I didn't want everybody to like fall unconscious for all these things falling from the ground. But this is pretty much the end of the fight. That is the end of Behemoth, and that is how to beat Type-0 Behemoth in Final Fantasy VII Remake. Like I said earlier, hopefully the video helps you out. If it does, drop me a like below. You can also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already with the links on the left hand side, and check out the rest of my guide to Final Fantasy VII Remake with the links on the right hand side. Leave any comments below, let me know how you get on against Type-0 Behemoth, and I will catch you next time.